Thank you very much for tuning in tonight to our Winter Alumni College and our class on negotiating. My boss is probably worried that I'm here, but he shouldn't be. We are led tonight through this exercise by Jennifer Pope from the class of 1991, and I will turn it over to her very briefly. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce two of my colleagues, Rebecca Schmidt, who is our Director of, oh boy, Becky, Donor Communications and Stewardship. Did I get that right?
Yes,
okay.
You got it.
And Morena Haas from the class of 2010, who is a major gift officer for the college as well. And we are here to help if you have any issues with Zoom, if you have questions. Most people are on mute right now, although you do have the ability to unmute yourself. Certainly you can feel free to use the chat to communicate with one another or to communicate with myself or Becky or Murray. I suspect that Jennifer will not be able to see the chat if she is sharing her screen, which she will be doing.
Yes.
So again, if you have some things that you want to say to Jennifer or you have questions for her, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll make sure that she gets that information. If anybody would like to have a live transcript, if you see, hopefully at the top of your screen, you can see a box that says an Otter AI transcript is available here, and you can click on that. If you don't see that, I'm going to feel real silly right now. Does anybody see that? Ah, cool. Claire's giving me the thumbs up. Thank you. All right. And so we ask everybody to turn their video on if you can, just to make it a little bit more friendly and welcoming, just like a Wooster classroom. That was our goal for these events. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Jennifer, and you can take it away.
Well, thank you, Sharon. I appreciate that. Hi, guys. My name is Jennifer Pope, and like Sharon said, I was class of 1991. So, yeah, looking at some of these years you guys graduated, I feel a little old, but that's okay. I work at Grand Valley State University in Michigan. It's in Grand Rapids, so right outside of Grand Rapids. And I teach international business and marketing, including negotiations. And so when I had this opportunity, I proposed this class, and it was one of the ones that was accepted. And so hopefully today you guys will contribute a lot. Hopefully you guys did the surveys so we can talk about your results of those surveys. And then we'll talk a little bit more about negotiation planning because 80% of negotiations is planning. So that's why I decided to focus on that part. And then we'll have your breakout rooms where you can talk about these scenarios I sent you and then come back together and talk about those a little bit more as a whole group. And so, and if you have any questions, of course, speak up. I am more than welcome to answer, any questions that you guys have about negotiations in general or whatever. So feel free to speak up and ask me some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. And then so there, if everybody can see it, just the title is, getting the best deal. So tips to being a better negotiator. Negotiation originally was kind of defined as, to do business and not, or at ease or leisure. So basically you do business, but not easily. But in today's world, we really do talk about it being, two or more parties that have these interests that are conflicting and you have to have a conflicting interest or really there's no reason to even negotiate. But you enter into interactions in the goal of reaching an agreement. Basically, negotiations today are your attempt to reach a mutual beneficial agreement and come to this that you can move on, and whether it's being with a conflict or trying to sell somebody something or something like that. And so in the parties, the negotiation really does involve the parties, of course. The issues, which we will be looking at later, because that's part of the initial planning, is determining what issues you want to be talking about in the big picture. The different alternatives you have for solving the conflict and coming up with these alternatives, your different positions in the negotiation and what you want from the negotiation and what you're looking to get and what you're willing also to compromise in order to get it, as well as what interest each party has in the negotiation and what interest they have in coming out of this negotiation. So one of the things we looked at was negotiation styles. And the reason I had you guys do this survey is it's a way to get to know yourself better, as well as how you read people and how people are going to negotiate, so that you have a better idea of how to plan and how to prepare and how to react to the person. And so negotiation styles really do have a big influence in how people approach negotiations, whether they're going to be aggressive or more passive, or being looking for that collaboration, or basically looking to win or not. It really does influence that. It influences it, but it is influenced by their culture. So different cultures tend to use different negotiation styles. It's obviously not complete, but their history, the different political systems, economic status, all of those influence what styles are typical for a person or what styles are typical for a culture. And depending on the style that the person likes, they can be striving for a compromise, so to coming to a mutually agreeable solution, or a consensus, which is where you try to get everybody to agree with you in a way. I mean, it sounds really pleasant, but it isn't always. And then surrender, which is you're just giving up, which really isn't a good approach to negotiations, I'll be honest. And so what we look at when we determine or try to determine a person's negotiation style, so if we're trying to say, okay, what's the style of the person I'm going to be negotiating with, we can look at their cultural background. Because depending if they're a relationship-oriented culture or more individualistic culture, things like that will determine how they negotiate, what their professional responsibilities are. So are they the boss, or are they just a minion? It's going to affect how they negotiate, believe it or not. And then the context of the discussion. So why are you negotiating? Are you negotiating because you're just trying to come to a sale? Or are you negotiating because there's a problem? And that's going to influence the style, as well as what you want out of the negotiations. Are you just looking for a one-time deal, deal's done, you walk away? Or are you trying to form a long-term relationship? And so different negotiation styles will help determine that as well. And if anybody has questions, of course, speak up. I can't see everybody, so. So just really quickly, I'm going to go through these styles, and then I want you guys to share what you got out of the survey and what happened. So a dodger can delay negotiations when you're not in a position of power. So a dodger doesn't like to negotiate, doesn't like to take risks, will actually put off the meetings rather than have to negotiate because they don't want to take the risk. And the strength is that if you're not in a position of power, you can delay the negotiations. And I always tell my students, because inevitably there is a person in the class that says, well, I came up with a dodger and that really kind of sucks. It can be very good at times. Okay? And there's a great story. Fred Meyer, who used to be the president of Meyer Grocery Stores, which is a Midwest chain, which happens to be headquartered here in West Michigan. Sam Walton tried to buy him out in the 80s. And Sam Walton came up and wanted to make a meeting with Fred Meyer and tried to buy him out. And Fred Meyer wasn't interested in being bought out. But instead of going to Sam Walton and saying, get out of here, we're not interested, he just refused to take a meeting with him. And refused and refused and refused until Sam Walton finally went away. And the official story is because he was too polite to tell Sam Walton no. I think he just didn't want to be bothered, but that's just me. A dreamer is also an interesting one because it's really good for first meetings to build trust. So the goal is to preserve relationships, and they will actually sacrifice some of their wants in order to maintain the relationship. So they will make large concessions in the idea that they'll build the relationship. So that's a weakness. But if you're trying to negotiate with a relationship-driven culture, or a culture that requires trust in order to do business with you, a dreamer approach can be very good at the beginning. And then the haggler is that they're very flexible, willing to compromise, but they expect their compromise to be reciprocated. So they want that give and take. You give, I give. And they're very short-term oriented with that way. So they want the instant compromise. They want the instant deal. The problem is sometimes they don't think about the long term. And so haggler's very good for a one-time deal, but not very good for building a relationship. And then the other two, the competitor, they enjoy conflict. Theirs is a win-lose approach. They want to win over you. So a haggler is a give and take. They're willing to give as long as they get something. Competitors just want to take. they don't want to give. And it can cause negotiation to break down because they get too hardball and the other side just decides it's not worth it and they walk away. Now, the creative problem solver, which a lot of people do think is the best style, I say yes, but there are times when you need the others. But they do, so they try to find the mutually satisfactory agreements. They take a very long time. They look through all the details. The problem is that you can get lost in the forest for the trees with them. So they get so caught up in some of the details that they don't always think about the long-term benefits, but they are very good at trying to find a mutual agreement that people come. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see more people, and let's talk about what your results are. Who wants to share what they got out of the survey? Sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
My two biggest ones were dreamer and problem solver.
Okay.
Interestingly, so.
And it's not unusual to have two styles that are close.
And the lowest one was competitor. The other two were equal, but 10 points lower than the dreamer and problem solver.
Okay, so what do you think that means?
It means I'll work. Oh, well, it means I'll get to know the people and take the time to get to know them, but then start have in mind the objective I want and be working towards that, not hammering at it or going right at it, but working towards it.
Right. Yeah, it can take you a while to get to that agreement, but yes, usually you come together with a good agreement. Okay. Anybody else?
I came out with 3 that are really close: the dreamer, the haggler, and the problem solver. They were all within a point or 2.
Right.
And the other 2, competitor and dodger, were down about 10 points from that.
Okay.
So it looks like I'm combined with about 3 different ones.
That's actually good. A good negotiator knows how to use all 5 styles depending on the situation. So the fact that you have strengths in 3 of them is a good thing. But how do you think that would affect how you negotiate? You have an idea of how that would affect how you negotiate? Patrick?
It means I can use different approaches because I have 3 different strengths.
Yeah. And with negotiations, you have to be flexible. So having those 3 strengths is a bonus.
Plus, I believe for every problem, there's always a solution. So I think for every negotiation, there's always an answer. And sometimes there's more than one answer.
Right.
It just might take a while to find it.
That's true. It is very true.
So I go into it optimistically saying, well, I can come to some kind of agreement with this other person and hopefully both of us gain something from it. You know, I go for the win-win.
Right.
As opposed to a win-lose. I don't like the win-lose.
Well, that's a good approach for negotiations in business. Win-win is the way to go anymore.
That's right. That's right.
Because relationships are so paramount, and the win-lose destroys a relationship.
And I think relationships are the key. I don't care what culture you're from. I think relationships are the key. Building trust. And different ethnicities have different priorities. And I think no matter where you are in the world, I think trust is important.
Yeah. Yeah. The survey was part of the email that was sent out with all the attachments. There's not a link per se, but I can send it out to people if they didn't get it. So anybody else want to share your results?
My top one was haggler at 32, and then problem solver at 31. Dodger was by far the lowest at 19, and then competitor and dreamer were tied around 28.
Okay. So how do you think that will affect how you negotiate?
I mean, I think generally I negotiate all the time. I'm a salesperson in San Francisco, and I really want the other party to get benefit, but I won't come to an agreement if I need to give away the house, or I won't feel like slighted in order to get that.
Right.
But I really care a lot about like the other party actually receiving value, and want to make sure that I understand that position and what they care about.
Right. Yeah, and I get that. I mean, I actually tell my students all the time, never sign a bad deal. But also you have to think about the other person. So they get so caught up and think they're going to lose points if they don't come to an agreement. And I have to tell them that's not the point necessarily.
Well, there's also so many other like facets on how to look at a deal that's outside of price,
Right.
Which a lot of people get caught up on, I think.
Right. And that's what I try to strive on, is looking at more than price. But, you know, that can be a struggle with some students because they get too caught up in the price. So anybody else?
I was just going to say, I also had similar results to Patrick in terms of the dreamer being my number one, and then the haggler and the problem solver tying below that just by a couple of points.
Mhm.
And what I found interesting about the entire survey is how much my negotiation styles have changed as I've gotten older.
Mhm.
And my unwillingness to put up with certain things anymore.
Yeah.
So I just find that to be a really interesting progression. Like I could look through that survey and say, oh yeah, 15 years ago, I totally would have just, turned over and like allowed that situation to be what it is, and have had that happen in the past. But taking it now and considering it, it's just a very different sort of answers that I was providing.
Right. Yeah, and that's true. And, as you, grow and age and get experience, your negotiation styles are going to change. So anybody else want to share their results?
I thought mine were sort of interesting.
Go, yeah,
sorry.
Claire or Daniel, either one.
Claire first.
Claire, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have to share, I feel, before I share my results, it's exactly why I signed up for this class, because I feel like my negotiation styles definitely need to evolve. I was really high in the Dodger and the Dreamer. And so I think that makes me very idealistic and then not wanting to actually follow through with getting those results from someone that I want. So, or something that I want with, whether it's, just anything out there. But
Right.
I did have kind of a mid score for the problem solver, so I see some hope there for myself. But
Right.
Yeah, those were my results in summary.
Right. And I think if you take this even 5 years from now, you might have completely different results. Right. Just from experience. And how about you, Daniel?
So I was kind of surprised, I guess. My top two were my top one was the Dreamer, and just a few points after that was the Problem Solver.
Mhm.
But I find that at least what I do when I'm interacting with a client, or when I'm representing a client, a lot of times I use more like, I guess, the haggler. So maybe it's just my understanding of the definitions of each.
Right.
One of my side gigs is that I do automotive purchasing consulting. And
Okay.
a lot of the times it requires negotiation with the dealer on, pricing or options or whatever it is.
Right.
And a lot of times it's very give and take with them, because they're not always super interested in building a relationship, particularly with me, but sometimes even with the customer too.
Right.
And so, I mean, I feel like I've gotten success for my clients, which is strange because I would imagine that like a haggler type or a competitor type would be more successful in that kind of environment.
Well, I think, yeah, it depends on whether or not you're trying to build the long-term relationship. Because a competitor is not good for building long-term relationships. So, and neither is particularly as a haggler. So if you're trying to build this relationship where you can go back to these dealers over and over and still get good deals, then being a dreamer or a problem solver is actually a better option. Because they're better at building long-term relationships. And it's not like a problem solver rolls over and lets them take what they want. They just work to try to find a deal that works for both parties. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, I mean, being a problem solver is actually a good thing in that situation, if you want to think of it that way.
Makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Sharon?
I came out pretty much flat across the board, except for the competitor, which was a good 10 points underneath of everybody else. That doesn't matter to me at all, because I'm really not one of those ones who likes to stick it to everybody. I'm
Right.
one I've never been competitive. I've always been like, let's help the weakest person in the team all along. And like Claire said, probably partly why I'm here, because I do feel like I don't hold my ground enough.
Right.
But so no surprise to me at all, but I definitely do look for the solution that's a win-win for everybody. And I like to form the long-term relationship.
Right. And honestly, in business today, relationships are so key that being a competitor can sometimes blow up in your face because you destroy you burn your bridges, basically. And you don't want to burn your bridges today in business. So, but you want to stand up for yourself. And I think that's where people need to work on it. And I admit, when I first started, when I was 22, I wasn't very good at negotiation, and I got better as I did it more. And so I improved considerably, and everybody can. It's just a matter of practice.
I hear you say, you tell your students never to sign a bad deal, because I feel like I'd actually be the one that would get, well, we've been here for so long, I might as well just agree to it.
Right.
So,
and that's very key with negotiations, is being willing to take the time to get them done and not feel rushed and not get frustrated and not get tired, because then you sign the bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a struggle at times because you just want it to be over and you're done. But then that's where you sign the bad deal, and you don't want to do that. So it's a lot of patience sometimes, a lot of patience. So anybody else want to share your results? Michelle?
Oh,
Susan, either one?
go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, wait, I'm trying to get back now.
I love your background, Michelle, by the way. Is that, in celebration of Black History Month? Looks like some important Black people in the background.
Yeah.
Yes,
Awesome.
yes.
Very nice.
I actually do a lot of work with the diversity, equity, and inclusion at my company as something in addition to my regular work. And so this was one of the backgrounds that someone used that I really enjoyed. So thank you for pointing it out. And so mine was overwhelmingly the problem solver, and the Dodger was like half the score of the problem solver. And I would say dreamer, haggler, and competitor were almost equal.
Okay. And that's not unusual. So
okay.
It's actually very normal to have multiple types very similar. And you maybe have one standout, but you also, and the good news with having the strengths in all the types is that you can adjust to the situation. Because while the problem solver is seen as the best, it's not always appropriate, depending on the situation.
And the funny thing is, I'm sure a lot of you have done the strength finders. Well, restorative is my number one strength, which is a problem solver. But yet, activator is one of my top 5, competitor, communication. So it is about being agile to whatever the situation.
Yeah. So. And that's important in business and in any situation where you're trying to negotiate. So Susan, what did you...
but but I understand.
Yeah. Susan.
Well, I thought it was interesting when you were talking about taking your time, because the reason why I'm here is I have a business that I'm in the process at the very early stages of potentially selling to my main supplier. And we started the first or second week of January when he told me he would absolutely be interested. And I just gave him the price a couple days ago, and we decided we're not going to talk for another 10 days because we both had things we needed to do towards the negotiation until then. But I think I need to do this over again and force myself to maybe put 5s and 1s on some things. I was mostly 4s, 2s, and 3s, but I ended up with a number 1 as the dreamer and 29 points, and 27 at problem solver, which would be my number 2. And they seem about right. And then 3 was Dodger, 4 was haggler, and 5th was competitor.
Right.
So one of the that I do have with this particular man that I'm considering selling my business to is I do think we have a good relationship. At least starting out, it's a good relationship. It's a trusting relationship.
And because you have the previous relationship, that's going to change how you negotiate versus if you had just met them. So it's going to be a different type of negotiation than if you had never met the man.
Okay.
Okay, so just expect that. I mean, it's not going to be the same dynamic because you guys already have the relationship and you already have the trust built.
Yes.
So it may be more of a problem solver approach just because you don't need to build the trust yet, again.
Right.
And so you
right.
can get more to it.
That would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll make the process more, comfortable and pleasing.
Right. Yeah. Anybody else want to share? Annabelle, Rebecca? No?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm negotiating with a landlord that lives 2,000 miles away, and the person that has the decision-making power I have never met. I have to work through my property manager, convey my offer through him, and then he conveys it to the person that has the decision-making power. So I have no chance to build a relationship with that person.
Right.
And so that's kind of a dilemma,
And
when you
that's
can't actually meet the person that has the decision-making power.
And is there a reason why you can't meet that person?
That's
Has the decision-making
just
power?
the way they do business. They don't offer to meet, and they have the power.
Yeah, and that's the problem. They're using that power because you really should be talking with the decision maker. And it makes negotiations a lot more complicated when you can't talk with the decision maker, unfortunately.
Maybe I should ask to talk to him directly.
I would ask to talk to him because because he's the one who can sign the deal,
Right.
That go-between lends itself to miscommunication as long as a bunch of other things. So
Even phone call would be better than nothing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And yeah,
I'll
it's better
try
to
that.
talk with the decision maker. It's much better if you can talk with the person who can make the decision rather than having a go-between. Okay.
Good. I'll try that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Can I ask there, Jennifer, how does that relate then when you've got like two parties in a negotiation with lawyers and the lawyers are kind of the go-between? Is that not a good?
That's a whole nother level of complication.
Okay.
That's just a whole nother level. Hopefully you're not in that type of situation where you're dealing through lawyers, because that just takes it to a whole nother level of trying to negotiate. And it makes it a lot harder to even come to an agreement because you have these middlemen who hopefully are serving in your best interest. At least your lawyer is serving in your best interest. But again, since you're not talking directly to the decision maker, it adds this layer of complication.
Okay.
And provides the opportunity for them to try to get a better deal that way.
Okay.
So, all right. Yeah, there's a negotiation strategy called the Salami Technique. So when you're not talking to the decision maker, the other side will say, this sounds good, but I got to go talk to my boss. And they'll come back and say, my boss likes it, but they just want this little bit better, just a little bit better credit terms, just a little bit lower price, and they basically slice the salami until it's all gone on you. So you do want to try to avoid that if you can. Okay, anybody else, or should we move on to social styles? No? Okay, I'm glad you guys are asking questions. I'm going to share my screen again so we can talk about social styles. And this is talking about how you read other people. So hopefully you guys had somebody else take that survey and we'll see how it comes out. All right, so social styles, there are 4 types: the analytical, the driving, the amiable, and the expressive. And depending on the person's social style, it is gonna affect their negotiation style. So what social style they fall into, or what part of the matrix they fall into, will affect what negotiation style they most typically use. It affects how they make decisions, what they expect from you. So how they're gonna react to your presentation or your argument, whether they're gonna want more facts or more relationship building. So the 4 types are the analytical, the driving, the amiable, and the expressive. And what they say is that the amiable and the analytical ask, the amiable and the expressive emote, so they're more emotive, where the driver and the analytical are more controlling, and the driver and the expressive are more likely to tell you what they want rather than asking. So I put this summary in there, just basically their backup styles, how they measure personal values, their growth needs, the climate they want. You can take a look at this. And also on the survey I sent you, there's a website at the very bottom And if you go onto that website, you can get all the pages that have all of the descriptions for later. So, and I don't want to take too much time going through these, but you can take a look at these. And if anybody wants my PowerPoints, they're more than welcome to send me an email. My email will be at the end and I'll share it and I'll happily send this to you. But it really is that drivers tend to be much more results-driven, data-driven. They just want what's going on and they want you to tell it what it is and they want an exception, an answer. Where, for example, an amiable is going to be more about relationships and feelings, and they want to be supportive and agreeable, and they're going to be more social. And so it really does depend. And so you want to try to at least guess what social style a person uses. It might help you with preparing your presentation, with preparing your negotiation with them. So how do you determine their social style? Well, you can look around the prospect's environment. You know, person who has, if they have a lot of personal pictures, they're more likely to be amiable or expressive than driver or analytical. If they have a lot of charts, they're going to be more analytical. If they're very organized, they might be more driver. Also look on their Facebook or their social media, Facebook, Xing, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is pretty crucial. Xing is the German version of LinkedIn, for those who don't know. Maybe talk to people who've done business with them before and how they react and what kind of things they expect from you. Listen to the subtext or look for the subtext in their email or on the phone. You know, are they very formal in their email? Are they very formal on the phone, or are they more casual on the phone or their emails? That might give you a clue of what social style they are. And that can help you determine how to create or put together your presentation for them and as to what they expect. Okay, so did anybody have this done for them or do this and figure out what social style they are? Rebecca? Sorry.
I came out as analytical, and that's right on base for me. Very organized, looking at data, problem solving, looking at both sides.
Right.
Thinking.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, and so you had somebody else do this for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Significant other, he got a kick out of it.
I had my wife do it, and she said I was a driver, and I don't think I'm quite a driver, but the reason is she's amiable. Can't get her to make a decision. And you know, she'll give me an answer and I'll say it was not a multiple choice question, it was a true question. You know, or
Right.
It's not an essay question. I want an answer. So to her, I'm a driver trying to drive towards an answer. And just for example, it took her 5 years to make up her mind to say yes to marry me. So, and she wanted me to realize it without saying so. So, you know,
well, I hate to tell you this, but drivers and amiables don't actually get along all that well.
What can I say?
Yeah. Opposites attract.
Something. Oh, yeah.
So who else? Anybody else want to share their results on this one?
I had the my partner take it in. I had as expressive, which is fitting. I'm a therapist, so that makes a lot of sense. But yeah.
And it's interesting that how well your partner knows you, though, right? And it's really good to have someone who knows you well take this. So anybody else have any interesting results? Are we?
Not interesting results in any way. It was exactly what, I mean, I could have told you, but I came out as an analytical.
Okay.
For exactly all those reasons, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody get a surprising result that somebody came up with something you didn't think you were? Or did they just know you so well?
Well, I thought I would have come out analytical, you know, because I have a math background, but, you know, what can you say if somebody else does it?
Right, and drivers are pretty, yeah, drivers are pretty data driven as well, so. Well, all right.
I came out amiable, and I thought I would have come out more analytical because that's more my style.
Okay.
Yeah. But amiable went out.
Well, you know, that's how the person interprets you. And that's why I had somebody else do this for you, is because this is you interpreting somebody else. So looking for those social cues that give you an idea of who this person is that you're going to be negotiating with and how they're going to want certain amounts of information, how they're going to want you to present data, how formal they're going to want you to be. And so being able to read the person you're negotiating with can be very useful in creating the ideal presentation for them so that they react to what you have to say in a positive way. Okay.
Good point.
Anybody else want to share your results with us or have any other thoughts and comments? Because the next part is I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about planning, and then I'm going to send you into your breakout rooms that I'm sure Sharon has been figuring out right now. Okay. Anybody else want to share? Okay. I would encourage you to go to that website that's at the bottom of the page of the survey, because that will give you the full descriptors of the social style matrix that you want to read more in depth to them. I didn't send them to you in hopes that they wouldn't take the answers kind of thing. All right. Okay, so let's talk about preparing for a negotiation. Come on. Okay. So planning for a negotiation is a variety of steps, and we're not going to have time to go through all of these steps, but the idea is that you want to define the issues. So what are the big picture issues that you are interested in talking about, that you want to talk about in this negotiation? And these are not specifics, but it'd be things like you want to talk about the price, you want to talk about the contract length, you want to talk about the order size. So the big picture issues that you want to talk about, and then basically when you're doing a larger negotiation, you're going to coordinate with the other side to create a common list of issues, so that you know what is going to be addressed and what's going to be talked about in the negotiation. Okay? But you want to define your issues and prioritize them as what is most important to you. Once you know the issues, then you want to know your position. And remember, that's one of the 5 things of a negotiation, is your position is where do you stand on this issue? Where do you stand, for example, on price? What price would you be comfortable with? Okay? How long a contract do you want to sign? How big an order do you want to make? So if order size is an issue, then you have to decide what's your position on that order. What is your goal in a session in that issue? Then the idea is to try to guess or make an educated guess about the other party's position. What is their goal for this negotiation, or what is their goal for this issue? Knowing the competition is very important. Knowing your competition, but as well as knowing their competition. Because their competition are your alternatives, and your competition are their alternatives. You want to know what your competition is doing as well as what their competition is doing. And because by knowing this, they can't come up to you and say, well, so-and-so said they would do it for this price. Why can't you match that? And if you know the competition, you know for a fact that the other party's not going to do it for that price and they're trying to scam you. Okay. Knowing your negotiation limits, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but these are, for example, what are you comfortable with for price? What are you comfortable with for the different issues? Knowing your target rate. What do you want, and what are you comfortable with, or what is your walk away point? Developing your strategies and tactics, and these are just things like how cooperative are you going to be, how competitive are you going to be. You even can plan out what negotiation styles you're going to use depending on the situation. Things about planning your closing, which is very important. You can't just wing a closing. Different tactics you want to use. I even talk to my students about using deceptive tactics, and how many deceptive tactics do you want to use? Sometimes bordering on ethical, but mostly just deceptive. And then the planning. So when is it going to be? Where is it going to be? What's the agenda going to be? The schedule. When what is the room setup going to be? Things like that as part of planning. And in a major negotiation, all of these need to be planned out. In a smaller negotiation, some of these are lesser important, but I found a great quote by Benjamin Franklin that says, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And so being prepared is so important in negotiations, and doing your background in negotiations. And in sales, as a salesperson, you're going to do your research and not just walk in blind. You're going to have, hopefully, the answers to the question the customer's going to ask. You're going to have all of those things and planned out before you ever go in. So issues and positions, just really quick. Like I said, you develop a list by analyzing what's going on, the prior experience, the research, consulting with experts, prioritizing your list, and then developing the common list with the other party. Okay. Now, the positions are your goals. And keep in mind that wishes are not goals. They need to be concrete. They need to be measurable. They need to have boundaries. And they should be linked to the other party's goals. Okay. And as part of your positions, you need to know what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. That could affect those goals. Okay. If you want to sign a contract with a major company, you need to make sure you have the production capacity to meet the needs of that company. And if you don't, then that can't be a goal to sign that contract because you can't meet the contract. So doing a SWOT analysis or a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis can help a lot with that. Okay. And then the negotiation limits, just a little bit, what's your target? And I always describe target as, if everything goes right, realistically, what do I want to get out of this? Okay. Keep in mind that it has to be realistic. It can't be like shoot for the moon. I mean, okay, you can shoot for the moon, just don't shoot for Mars. Your reservation point, which is your bottom line, your walk-away point. This is the point where you say, I'm done. There's no point in negotiating anymore because I can't go any lower or any higher, but it's your bottom line. And then your BATNA, which is an interesting one, and I think some people struggle with, it's called best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And this is, if this negotiation fails, what do I do next? So a BATNA could be, I'm going to go to the other party's competitor to try to sign a deal. That would be a BATNA because you've got to a point where you're not going to do business with this one party. So what do you do next? You go to another party. When I talk about salary negotiations with my students, I do this with, do you have another job that you're interested in? Do you have another job you've applied for that you have a backup when you turn down this job, for example? That would be your BATNA. Okay. And then what power do you have? And power is a very tricky thing because it can be real or it can be assumed. And believe it or not, assumed power has just as much power as real power. And it's kind of a tricky thing. Do you have the information? Do you have, like Patrick was talking about, having the, the fact that they're insisting that he go through a middleman, the other party is giving him, that party is gaining power by not dealing directly with him. So what power do you have? And then the bargaining zone, I just did a picture of it to try to explain it. Because people get, this is the other thing you're trying to find is your bargaining zone. And that is the area where you negotiate. Okay, that's the range that you negotiate in. And it starts with the seller's reservation point. So the seller's reservation point is as low as they're willing to go before they have to say, I can't negotiate anymore. And then the buyer's reservation point is the highest they're willing to go before they don't negotiate anymore. And you're not going to know for certain the other side's reservation point, but you can make an educated guess. And you have an idea of where you're probably going to come to a deal. And you can have a bargaining zone for everything, the price, the order size, the contract length, the credit terms, it doesn't matter. There can be a bargaining zone for every issue in the negotiation. So every issue should have a bargaining zone so that you know where you're comfortable in negotiating, because you don't want to sign a bad deal. Okay. So what I'm going to have you guys do in 20 minutes, questions. The last thing I want you guys to do is write the questions that you want to ask, because you don't have all the information. When you sit down to a negotiation, no matter how much research you do, you're not going to have all of the information that you want. You're going to have to ask the other party some questions. And it's really important that you plan out what questions you want to ask. Okay, it's not like you have to write out the exact questions, but here's the information I want to ask them about. Okay, so the right questions at the right time is the best way to get that missing information. They should be planned in advance, like I said. And believe it or not, asking the other side if you can ask them some questions, it makes them more open to answering the questions. Rather than just bombarding them with questions. Saying, is it okay if I ask you a few questions? you'll actually get better answers. And there are two types of questions. The open-ended questions, which tend to be more early in the negotiations, are to gather that information, to try to get the other side to talk. Okay? Because the more they talk, the more information you get. Okay? I think Mark Twain said, you know, you have one mouth and two ears, so you should listen twice as much as you talk. Okay? Don't be afraid to just let them talk. You get information that way. Okay? And then the probing or questions at the end is where you're getting the specific answers, the yes, no questions, the single sentence answers. You know, how many do you want to order? When do you, would you like to get this? What credit terms can we get? These are very specific answers that you're looking for to try to consolidate the deal. So any questions on any of this? I can't see anybody or some people, so if you have questions, speak up.
I just wanted to say that I've heard let silence do the heavy lifting. So when you ask a question, to just stop and not answer it for them, and
Right.
And the longer you stay quiet, the more they'll talk.
Yeah, there was an interesting quote by the Dalai Lama that says, if I talk, I'm only sharing what I already know. If I listen, I learn something new.
Yeah.
Okay. So being willing, and this is a hard skill for negotiators, is to listen, because we like to talk. As salespeople particularly, we like to talk. And I've worked in sales before I went back into academia. And so it's really important to listen, because you're going to get information that you may need, or you may even get information they didn't mean to share with you because you listen so well. So it can be a very useful tool.
It's easy to just start talking because I'm nervous, you know?
Right.
And that's not a good
Yeah,
thing.
I agree with you. I mean, don't be afraid of the silence. And the other thing I recommend is don't feel like you have to respond to their question right away. Allow yourself a beat to think about the answer. Okay. And this helps with less listening. If you say, I'm going to listen to what they are saying and then allow myself a beat to come up with the answer rather than trying to think of the answer while they're still talking. Because you might miss some information if you're not listening carefully. So it's a good skill to build on and to practice. And if people are interested, I actually do have a survey on listening skills. I just didn't include it in this class, but I do have that as well. So what I'm going to have you guys do in your breakout rooms is I'm going to have you define your issues and prioritize them, determine your positions, determine your limits, and then write out questions that you'd like to ask the other side. And please have one person kind of take notes for you guys so you can share it when we come back. So any questions on this? I'm going to stop the share before we go into breakouts, but if anybody has questions, please ask.
Are we doing one of the case studies?
Yeah, I guess Sharon will tell you which side, because we don't have as many people who showed up, so I think there's going to be some shuffle. But yeah, you'll be given one, and then you'll just be that one, either the buyer or the seller. Okay.
By issues, what do you mean?
Like things like price, order size, contract length. Just based on the case, what do you think the most important issues to talk about in the negotiation?
Got it.
Any other questions?
Jennifer, how much time for the breakout, and then when does the class end? Like how much time are we have to do the chair back or whatever?
Oh, geez, it's almost 8. Well, let's just say 15 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes to end with.
Okay.
That sound good? I don't want to keep people any later, but I'm willing to stick around and answer questions afterwards as well. So why don't we go into the breakout rooms if there are no other questions, and then we'll come back in 15 minutes and wrap up.
Okay, so I think we have the breakout rooms are a little unbalanced, assuming that people did some preparation in advance. I think we should probably keep them in the same rooms that they were assigned to.
Mm-hmm.
So buyer team number 1 only has 2 folks in it. Buyer team 2 also only has 2 folks in it. It looks like both of the seller teams, teams 1 and 2, will have 3 or 4 people in them. I think someone actually is getting ready to leave. So anyway, you won't have a whole lot of people in your group, but that should, you know, make for a really good personal discussion and note taking. And again, the timing for the breakout rooms should be 15 minutes, and then you'll get like a minute warning countdown kind of thing. So I'm going to press the button and hope the magic works. And if not, you'll see me do some scrambling.
All right, guys, have fun and interact with each other, and then we'll come back. Michelle. Oh, okay. Sarah?
Sarah, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Look at that. It worked.
So how do you think it's going so far?
I think it's going well. I mean,
Okay.
I have to say, I mean, I wasn't sure that it would, I don't know that this is a course I would have signed up for on my own, but I'm learning a lot. And I knew that I would, because it's not, you know.
I honestly, when I applied, I was like, this is such a long shot because this is not what Wooster does.
But you know, it's something that everybody has to do at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very useful skill.
Right. Well, and even in the work that we do, for example, Murray, you know, going into someone's home, I mean, she always has to have a plan. Doing her homework. I mean, we all are doing that before we're having any kind of meeting with anybody, no matter what it is that we're discussing. Sharon, when she's looking to kind of motivate potential volunteers. I mean, you know, all of it is negotiating to some extent.
Right.
Even if it's not an actual, although I do work with actual contracts. So.
Right.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I know this is heavily sales focused, but that's, you know, what I teach is sales. So, but yeah, no, I was like, okay, what category does this belong in? I'm looking at all the categories they say to pick, and I'm like, I don't know.
I think it's really, really interesting. And now I want to go back and do I did not do any of the pre-work because I wasn't actually going to be part of the group breakouts, but now I want my husband to do that survey. See what he thinks I am.
Stephanie has copies, so or I can send them again, but yeah.
No, I actually she sent us all of the materials too. So I looked through it, but now I'm actually going to take it. You've motivated me, Jennifer.
One thing I didn't say is I get a lot of competitors for undergrads. I think that competitor tends to become less common as you get older.
Yeah.
Because some of them embrace that competitor and it tends to screw up when they negotiate with the other students. Because I would teach this as a 14 weeks class, and so they're negotiating every week with each other. But I tell them they can't learn how to negotiate by listening to me talk.
Yeah.
So they start negotiating from day one, and they negotiate every week. Pretty much a flipped classroom. I tell them to read the book.
Yeah. Wow. But it's interesting, you know, because I think when I hear negotiation, I immediately think about things like salary, buying a car, or some other big ticket item or something. But like Murray and I had a meeting last week, and now that I'm looking back at that, Murray, I mean, that was us like stating our case and negotiating with the Women's Philanthropy Institute to try to get. We were trying to get a speaker for our budget,
right?
You know, who could also be amazing, right? And I mean, I'm not trying to pat us on the back too hard, but like but in some ways that was a negotiation, just like every one of your donor visits.
Right.
Yeah.
And we ended up getting 2 speakers for the price of 1 because we held our ground to what our budget is.
Well, that's good. And the fact that you knew what your budget is so important.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what your bottom line is, you end up going below it or above it. You know, because the bottom line can be either range. Because if you're a buyer, your bottom line is at the top. Because that's the most you want to pay.
And you have to stick to that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
I
why
mean, how many people go in to buy a house and they're like, okay, this is my budget. And then they see their dream house and they're like, well, maybe I'll
Yeah,
just
I
go
know.
eat for the next 4 years or whatever.
I refuse to look at houses that weren't in my budget.
Smart.
It's like, I'm not interested. That has to be in my budget or I'm not even going to go in. Because I
And I
didn't
would
want to
hate,
fall in love.
Right.
I would hate to be on the other side of the table talking through negotiations with you, Jennifer. They would be like, what did I get myself into? Oh my goodness.
Good thing I'm in the Midwest, huh? No, I mean, we're, you know, my dad started that scholarship you mentioned, the Alumni Prize. So of course we've been trying to support it. In my grandmother's name, because she got kicked out of Wooster for getting married.
That is one of my favorite prizes. I just, her story is phenomenal. And then of course it supports our non-traditional female students. So it's gone to people we actually have worked with.
Right.
Because these tend to be, they're not all people that are actually working at Wooster while they're putting themselves through school. But the last one was actually the wife of our head of campus grounds. I mean, she has all these little kiddos and she's working and she's going to school, and it's, you know, it's such a big deal to be recognized for that, because you are non-traditional in a traditional undergraduate school. And the fact that she got kicked out and now her named fund is supporting these women who are almost always married, who are, you know, raising families and trying to juggle 14 things in the air. It's just,
you know, because, you know, this was during World War II. You weren't allowed to be married at Wooster back then.
Right.
So she got married and got caught and got kicked out.
So it's interesting because, you know, even because then, you know, couples from, I mean, not too far off from your dad's time at Wooster, right? Like I know couples from the early 60s who lived in the married housing.
Right.
You know, like, I don't know. I find that kind of stuff.
I think it was like right after World War II, they changed because, you know, all the GIs were coming back and going into school on the GI Bill, and it just didn't make sense after that.
Right.
But this was 42, so it was during World War II, so it hadn't changed yet.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, he decided to start that. You know, my father's rather wicked sense of humor, I think.
I love it.
Non-traditional students, and then if there are none of those, it goes to a female swimmer, I think is number 3.
So something like that, or a female, there's something in there, but we have always had someone who's
I know. I think he just put the swimmer in because we both swam at Wooster.
Yeah.
So.
Jennifer, I have to tell you, so I got married last August, and I had my husband take the social styles assessment day, and then I took it too. And we compared numbers, and he's like, okay, so you have to promise you can't get upset with the answers the score that I put down. And we compared, and we were to the exact number on each side.
Wow.
I think this is a good sign.
Yeah, that's true. Unlike my dad and his wife, who are apparently polar opposites.
Yeah. But they still are together, so that's
they're you know, she makes him happy, and that's all I really care about. So
yeah, my husband was in sales
3 or 4 days with her before she drives me up a wall, but
oh yeah. Well, fish and visitors, that's what they always say. What they after 3 days. Yeah, my husband was in sales, and so he is the negotiator. And I just leave it to him, you know, car sales, anything, insurance rates. I mean, you know, he's always very polite, but he is, you know, he does have, you know, this is how far we're going to go. This is how low we're going to go. This is our breaking point. This is what we'll accept and not accept. And, you know, he's got it all planned out.
Oh, I have fun trying to negotiate in places where people don't think that you can negotiate. Like I negotiated in Sears. I negotiated in Meyer. You know, just the situation presented itself, and it's like, okay, I'm going to get myself a better deal.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah. So
Best Buy, that's a prime one for my husband. He's always, you know, right on it. I just go and look at something else while he's doing his thing.
Oh, well, my dad was there when I negotiated a washer dryer at Sears. So he just sat back and let me do it. And then when we all finished, he looked at the salesperson and goes, you know, she teaches sales, right?
They probably felt like they'd been hit by a truck. They were like, wait,
Yeah,
I
pretty
didn't even know I
much.
could do that. But it was always the sticker price. But you know, in some, like you said, cultural, I mean, there's some cultures where they anticipate negotiation.
Right. Well, and it's not common in the US. And so, you know, we have this Puritan ideal that the seller's going to set the fair price for both he and the buyer. And so people don't like to negotiate here, but I try to tell my students to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. And I hate that, Becky, we are like you and John in that my husband, Jennifer, runs his own business. He works in sales, and I just, I let him do it. And then I'm like, oh my God, I've turned into June Cleaver or something. Like, I hate that. But I also recognize that it's a strength that he has.
Right.
And, we always talk about it beforehand and like we're on
Right.
board with like, here's what
Right.
we're going to do. But then I let him execute the plan. Yeah.
Right.
But I do. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
former women's studies major turned June Cleaver, right?
Yeah.
Like,
But you
Right.
could do it. You could do it, Sharon. You could. You just, you
Yes.
just recognize you got to let him just. But no, I mean, having that discussion at the beginning and knowing that
Oh, she
all I
froze.
have to do is look at him and say, no, and he would
Right.
shut it down. I mean, there is that. I mean, he's not sort of going on.
You just have to give him the look. You don't even
Yeah.
have to say anything.
True. Well,
Or
and
we do
you
the
can always
good
start
cop,
small
bad
by,
cop.
I will do things like, if I'm in a store, I'll say, do you have any coupons I can use?
mhm.
Just a small little thing,
Right.
Yeah.
And that could be a start.
I have my kids scour their phone. Look up for
Yeah.
coupons, checking it out before we check out. That's their jobs.
Or, if there's going to have a sale in a couple days, I ask if I can take advantage of it,
Mhm.
Right.
things
Yeah.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they will let you do
So
that.
I-
Or if you're just at the end of,
Yeah, they
the
will.
sale was the day
Mhm.
before and you're done or whatever. Price comparisons.
Yeah.
Knowing what
And at the
other
end of season
places-
stuff, you can walk in.
Mhm.
Yeah. People are packing up holiday stuff. You can really get a good deal because they don't want to put that in storage. So
Yeah.
like right after Halloween, right after Christmas, if you go into a store and they're trying to pack up that stuff, you just offer to buy it for half off and they'll give it to you most of the time.
So why are we not writing these things down?
I know.
ladies?
I am. Holiday
Especially in
sale.
like smaller stores or not like the big grocery stores, but
Yeah.
like a party store or something at the end of a holiday, they have to pack all that stuff up and they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
My neighbor and I walked out with giant spiders at half off once at a party store. Because they didn't want to, they were big and they were going to take up space in their warehouses and they didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So they were willing to sell it to us for 50% off.
That's
Well, and
like,
if you have somebody who's actually there who will make that decision too.
Well, yeah, you have to, like I said with Patrick, you have to have the decision maker.
Right.
mhm.
You absolutely
The
have to have the
manager,
decision
the
maker.
owner, yeah.
I mean, that's in Meyer, I had to wait for them to get back to the manager before I could agree to the deal. They're like, well, you have to wait. And I'm like, okay. All right, I'll wait. I think they were hoping I would say never mind and walk off, but I didn't.
Sure.
Got
Yeah.
$40 off a camera.
Hey, good for you.
So, back in the days when we used cameras.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So,
It's
Oh,
funny
yeah.
though, because sometimes that makes people uncomfortable. I mean, I remember going shopping with somebody who would negotiate over everything. I mean, he never take anything at sticker price.
right,
And at some point you're just like, I do not know this person,
right.
because it's so not expected.
Right.
But
Yeah, I moved to Taiwan right after college for 2 years, and my parents came to visit me about a year and a half in, and my mom was so embarrassed when I negotiated. I mean, she was just like awful. She'd be like punching me, just pay them, just pay them. I'm like, shut up. Just leave me alone. She just hated it. She hated me haggling and negotiating for stuff, but she wanted to buy a lot of stuff.
and at the end it worked out. But
Yeah, it worked out for her. Yeah, no, she and my brother were like competing to see who could buy the most. I actually had to give my brother an extra bag to carry all the stuff he bought home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he bought a case of Taiwan beer for some reason. It's not good beer. We used to joke the air quality in Taiwan was terrible back then in the early 90s, and it might be better now, but it was awful. And we joked that we'd probably die a few years early from breathing that air, but our bodies would last forever because the beer was full of formaldehyde, which we drank regularly. That was the preservative. It was not a good beer, but it was cheap, and I was 22, so.
Right. Wonder what it tastes like by the time you got it home. I can't even
I have no
imagine.
idea. He just wanted to share it with his friends because he was so impressed or something. I don't know. But I drank enough of that to know I did never want to drink it. I never wanted to drink it again. But, I was 22. I was a volunteer, didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
But it's what I wanted to do after graduation. So I did.
How long were you over there?
A couple of years. So then came back and worked in sales for a few years before going back to grad school.
You know what? I just got a notice that the breakout room time is ending. That seemed like a fast 15 minutes to me, but I guess it's already almost 10 after.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And so,
well, I'll go ahead and close them. And then I think as soon as I press that, then they get their 60-second countdown kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
All right. And then we'll see what they came up with.
Yeah.
We'll hopefully have some good stuff.
Well, it's cool that some of them are actually in negotiations right now.
Right.
That the timing was perfect for them.
Right. I know. There was, I'm disappointed a couple of people didn't show up. There was one woman who was like desperate to get in the class because she needed this, but I don't remember her name. I don't know if she showed.
Oh gosh, that's too bad.
Well, Jennifer, I know we had about
Becky Bauer. No.
Yeah, no, maybe not. We had about a third of the people at the yoga class that had signed up, so it's not unusual.
Oh, there's Becky. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Do you guys have an interesting discussion? The two of you? You have to unmute.
Oops. Yeah.
Both very similar in our negotiation styles. So we're sort of like,
We're going.
So
yeah.
Interesting. So, but.
Right.
Is everybody back? I think
Looks
so.
like everybody, I feel like we're missing one person, but.
You said somebody had to leave?
Yep, that's right. Sarah Smith-Polderman had to leave. So yeah, so we were good. We have everybody.
All right. Okay. So I think we'll spend the last maybe 10, 15 minutes talking about what you guys came up with, and then I will answer any last minute questions at the end. So I don't keep you guys too late tonight. So how about we start with one of the buyer groups and what issues you decided were important and go from there. Becca, do you want to start? Were you a buyer group or a seller group?
I'm a buyer group. We were a buyer group, Annabelle and I. For us, the issues were the contract length, the minimum sales issue, the amount of money we were going to spend, percentage of retail, and we thought maybe we'd start out with a question about the Aztec line, sort of an open-ended question to try to develop that relationship, because that was the line we were interested in, maybe get them talking a little bit more. And that would sort of, like I said, build relationship and move into a little more ease with some of the other questions.
Okay. All right. Good. How about the other buyer group? Did you have a similar list or something else? Who was the other buyer group? I don't remember who the groups were.
So that was Patrick and I.
Okay.
Our list was pretty similar. We were trying to focus on a strategic way of how we wanted to spend our money. And so our scenario had 30 stores in Saudi Arabia, but another 45 across other Middle Eastern countries.
Right.
So we figured we would take a sampling of 2 or 3 stores per country and just buy enough furniture to stock those stores to give us the best sort of outlook on how each country reacts.
Right. So did you think about the contract length or the order size or things like that as part of your issues? Is that what you were focusing on?
Yeah, we talked about contract length, although we were pretty okay with 2 years
Mm-hmm.
because that seemed like enough. We thought anything less than 2 years was not enough time. Anything more would be, too much of a heavy investment. So 2 years seems
Right.
about right.
Okay. So that your position on the issue was the contract length was 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. How about some of the sellers? What did you guys come up with? Which group? I have
Oh,
your
well, that
names
was
here.
our group. That was our group. Well, some of the issues we came up with were obviously also contract length and negotiating, relationship building, that kind of stuff. But also, profit structure and how we were going to be able to negotiate a place that we both felt comfortable with in terms of price, and on also kind of establishing our company with them as, one of the premier companies doing this kind of manufacturing, that we are an incredibly authentic company located in Mexico, working with people who are, Mexican, and like that lends a sense of authenticity to this product that would appeal to high-end buyers who are looking for, that kind of furniture.
Okay, cool. How about the other group, which was what?
Yeah, I'll take that one to start.
Okay.
We were, again, like the icebreaker question conversation, we're interested in knowing why they think this authentic Mexican furniture is going to be popular over there. What's their background on that kind of a thing? And when the contract negotiations, obviously our paperwork says we wanted a 5-year contract.
Right.
That's, some of that would depend too on whether we could just satisfy their needs with what we have. Are we going to need to upscale our production? If we're making a commitment, then we're going to want a longer commitment. But also thinking along the lines of being able to maybe a 5-year contract with a 2-year renegotiation. If after it's really not working, then maybe we need to retool it somehow. If you don't have sales, we might work out something more along those lines. Other things that we were concerned about a little bit was taking some of the risk off of us. Are they paying in dollars or are they paying in pesos? Do we have an exchange rate to worry about? Where do we get freight on board? Is it our furniture on the shipping container or is it their furniture on the shipping container? Those were some of the issues we were looking at.
Right. And that's good because, I mean, I changed this a little bit from how I teach it in the students. I actually take the transportation out of it because I want them to focus on culture, but I didn't take that out for you guys. And just to, as another really important issue in any kind of international contract is how are you going to get the product to the customer? So this, terms of shipment for exporting is pretty crucial. So the free on board, the free, is it free delivery duty paid? Is it free alongside ship? Is it free on board, et cetera? So all of those are important. So does anybody have anything else to add to the positions or did you guys pretty much feel
something else that I spotted was that there's a huge, there's a difference in the markup on the product, our cost of production versus sales. Some items have just a little bit of a markup on it. Some of them have a larger markup on it.
Yeah.
It might be possible. Saudis, like to bargain and whatnot. Maybe give them a little something by offering to take off more off the price of the items that we're making more money on.
Right. Well, and they won't know what your cost is anyway.
Right.
So
a special exclusive deal on those items.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be some of the things you might want to ask as a buyer, is things like that. I mean, it just depends on what you're willing to share. Anything else on the positions? I mean, a lot of you shared your positions with the issues as well, but any other positions you wanted to talk about that you wanted to take with this?
Well, I would love to hear actually from Kevin, because he had a really interesting thought in our conversation about in terms of profit scaling. So Kevin, could you just mention that, because I thought it was a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if our goal is to do 5 million over 5 years, that doesn't necessarily, like, you could do 5 million in 1 year, right? But also, if that was our goal, a good way to build mutual trust is to start smaller with basically a proof of concept to see how they sell in the stores, and then build that as volume improves year after year, and maybe give bigger discounts for volume orders. And also basically assume that things will be successful, but also de-risk it for the other party and say,
Right.
you know, if you're not selling this or that, we can basically, you know, stop the contract at year 2 or year 3 or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, trying to focus on their risks. It's basically, we thought that their big risks are either the product doesn't sell, and also that will be a dependable supplier where getting goods to them on time, on price and everything. And so the step model might be nice because you can basically make larger and larger commitments to each other over time.
Yeah, and that again is the big difference of having professionals versus students in the class. My students would have never come up with that idea, my undergrads. But that's actually a really good way to approach it, especially in a large deal like this where you've got, you know, a lot of risk on both sides. Because you're putting out the risk as a seller of are you going to be able to meet their production needs? But they're taking the risk of are they going to be able to sell the product? And so
yeah, and another thing we talked about is to not assume what they can sell it for, and also not assume how much they can buy. I mean, if $5 million is our goal, they might want to buy 50 million right up front. I mean, it's possible, right?
Yeah.
So one thing to consider is what's the upper end that our company would actually be able to deliver to them.
Right.
To not overcommit ourselves and ultimately put us both in a bad situation.
Right. And that's part of those goals that you needed to, you know, how much can you do before you commit to doing too much? You know, because you don't want to commit to producing, you know, $10 million worth if you can't every year. Maybe it takes you a couple of years or something. So that's really important, and companies can get themselves in serious trouble if they overcommit, because they're so excited about getting this big contract that they don't think about what they can do realistically. So there's a lot of things to go into it, and I think it's a lot more detailed than some people realize. Even just a simple negotiation, for example, you know, salary negotiation is a lot more complicated than I think people realize, because it's not just about the money. It's about everything else that goes along with the job, like the benefits and the added incentives. And if you're focused on the money, you miss out on a lot in a salary negotiation.
Gotta be careful of that quantity discount thing too, because you say you give a discount for quantity, they may decide to order 3 years worth at once, and this throws a big monkey wrench in your whole production plan. You won't give them a discount if they smooth it out, not if they give you lumps of demand.
Right. So offering a cumulative discount rather than a one-time discount.
Yes, so you smooth your production.
Right.
Manage your capacity better.
Right. I mean, and that's important to think about, because you can offer that cumulative, that quantity discount, but making it cumulative so that you don't over commit to production. But if they agree to buy X amount over a year, then you give them the discount, kind of thing, rather than a one-time discount. So it's a lot of things to think about.
Right,
Did you
and
guys think of
some companies give rebates or whatever they might want to call it. So once you, instead of giving it up front, you know, a 2% discount because of, you know, if you purchase $1 million, you'll give you an extra 2%. We'll give you back the 2% at the end of the year after you've paid us $1 million and you've ordered $1 million.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense, because you want to make sure that they actually make the purchase before you give them the discount or the rebate. But, you know, think about a cumulative discount of, if you buy X amount, then we'll give you, you know, the sandwich shops or the hotels that say if you do 10, you get the 10th, 11th one free, kind of thing. Those are also good examples of cumulative discounts.
And what do you do if the purchasing manager says, I like that 2% rebate, but could you put that in my personal account in the Cayman Islands?
Okay, that's an ethics issue.
Maybe for you, maybe not for him.
No, but, and that's the interesting thing with international, is that ethics also vary internationally as to what's allowed, what's ethical, and what's, you know, completely unethical. And so that's something you have to be aware of in doing your research when you do business with another country. I mean, you have to do research when you do business in the US, but going overseas is just a whole nother ball of wax. So, did you guys write in any questions that you wanted to ask the other side? Or did you not get that far?
Yeah, we want, go ahead.
Go ahead, Claire.
We were curious because it's a big international deal and we're 20 years old. I guess it's relatively newer. We were wondering how much they've dealt with other international companies and the success of those companies in Saudi Arabia.
That's a very good question to ask, yes. Because you want to make sure that they're going to treat you well as well. And, you know, what's their history in dealing with smaller companies or other international companies? Any other questions, Jim?
We want to discuss with them why they think that Aztec furniture is going to sell in Saudi Arabia. Do they have a true customer demand for it, or does some purchasing manager have this wild idea that maybe he can sell it, or, you know?
Yeah.
But this can be done in kind of the introductory conversation and, you know, this kind of stuff. But yeah, that could be crucial.
Right. Yeah, because if they can't sell it, they're not going to want to buy anymore. Anybody else? I'm trying to be respectful of time, but I did want to say just some background. This, as you saw the student's name at the top of the sheet, this was actually written by a student of mine who was an exchange student from Mexico many years ago. Because my final assignment in that class is write your own negotiation scenario for me, because they always are complaining about my negotiation scenarios. And it would have been better if you'd done this. It would have been better if you'd done that. So I have them write their own, and sometimes I use them. So this one is one that I chose to use. And actually, when I do it in class, I put a lot more culture into it. So I have them research the different cultures and how they're going to interact with each other based on the Mexican and the Saudi Arabian culture. And they do go pretty far with this. Sometimes the Saudi Arabian side will interrupt the negotiation so they can go pray. The Mexican side will offer the Saudis some pork, you know, things like that. So it gets kind of interesting and they have fun with it. So any final questions? Anybody have questions for me that are just negotiations in general? Kevin?
It's not so much negotiation, but I'm always curious on if there's some product you bought that you would pay way more for. So basically the price you paid for it, like you put so much more value into that thing. For example, I bought like rainbow slippers for like $50. But I look how many times I've used them and how long they've lasted, and I would pay like $400 or something.
Right.
And I'm just kind of curious.
I mean, honestly, the slippers are actually good. When I have these slippers that I wear every day, and because I'm working from home, I pretty much wear them all the time. I barely put shoes on anymore. And they're just cheap ones I bought in Slovenia. And I would love to get like 50 more of those. And I would pay twice as much or 3 times as much as I paid for them, because I think I paid a few euros a piece. I mean, they're really cheap sleepers, but they're so good. And I miss being able to go there and get more, because they're starting to wear out. And I'm like, I want more, but I can't get them. I get them there and I can't get them there. And there are a few other things I think probably that I would pay a lot more for. You know, just some experiences that I've had that I would gladly do again and pay for again, like some of the travel experiences I've had, like going to China, going to Chile, going to South Africa, South Korea, that I would love to pay. I would pay more to go do those again.
Economists call that consumer surplus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, the economists.
That's part of the asking questions, you know, to find out what the other person is really interested in. And in my case that I explained, that I mentioned in the beginning, in my very first conversation with him, my supplier said, I have a niece and nephew that work in the business, and we're manufacturers, and I hate to have them have to go into manufacturing. I'd love to have them have an e-commerce business, and we'd love to start selling our jewelry online. And but we have nothing like that. We have no experience with it, but this is what I want for my niece and nephew. His 2 siblings work with him in the business.
Right.
And so there's a psychological component to why it is that he wants to enter into this. And I remember one time, 20, 30 years ago, I sold this little portion of my business to a competitor. We used to do this trade show for 2 weeks in Dallas. And after we finished the deal and, you know, he gave me the money, I said to him, I go, well, do you want my, this is what like not to do. I said, do you want my, you know, mailing list? And do you want my list of suppliers for the things that I sell? And he said, no. He said, what I wanted was your booth location at the trade show. And I contacted the trade show people beforehand. And I asked them, if I buy her business, can I get her spot? Because I had been there the longest and I had the prime spot. As soon as people walk into the trade show, that's all he wanted.
Yeah. And you know, that's why it's so important to ask questions.
I know. I didn't do it. That's why I'm saying I didn't do it right, because maybe that would have been worth more to him than what I what I asked. I don't know.
And that's why another hint for negotiations is, you know, oftentimes a buyer is going to reject your opening offer. They're going to just out and out reject it. Never lower the price when they reject your opening offer. Figure out why they rejected the offer, because it may be something like they wanted your prime booth spot.
Yeah, right.
It may have nothing to do with money.
So how do you find that out? What kinds of questions do you ask?
You ask them why they rejected your offer. What could you do better? Start asking them just various questions and find out why they didn't like it. I mean, sometimes you just say, you know, why did you turn it down? Is price an issue? But if you lower your price, you can't bring it back up. And they might have been very happy with your price and you lowered it and now you're stuck.
Right.
So it's really just asking them questions about why they rejected the offer.
It might have been some other condition of the offer that.
Right.
Okay.
It absolutely often is another condition. It's not necessarily the price. It's something else about the offer that you made that they don't like. And when they reject it, people assume it's the price. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Michelle, I will definitely send you my slides. Okay. Thank you coming. All right. Anybody else?
Well, I just want to point out, when you all run your breakout rooms, Rebecca, Murray, and Jennifer and I were just sort of chit-chatting. And I loved it because Jennifer was talking about how she negotiates all the time, like for everything in her day. Okay, maybe not every single thing.
No, not everything, but
a lot. And she made the point that you don't learn how to negotiate unless you do it. Right. So, I mean, obviously, this has been incredibly enlightening and valuable. I've certainly learned a lot. And I wasn't even in the breakout rooms, you know, analyzing those scenarios. But practice, I guess, is another big thing I'm taking away from this. Like, you have to practice negotiating. And, you know, Jennifer just threw out a couple of tips to us that make so much sense, like easy things that you can start with if you're sort of uncomfortable, you know, maybe negotiating a big ticket item. You know, when you're shopping at a store and you go to check out and you're at Macy's or whatever, ask them, you know, do you have any coupons I can use? What are they going to do? If the worst thing they're going to do is say no big deal. Right. Or, you know, you're buying a washer and dryer set or something and you're at Lowe's, ask them if there's a sale that's about to start that you could capitalize on, even though you're buying a week early or something like that. And it's just, those aren't things that I necessarily think of as negotiating. So I just thought that those were really salient points that, you know, just came up as we were chit-chatting. So.
Right. And they can be very helpful, and be willing to be patient, you know, because sometimes they'll try to turn you off by saying, well, I have to talk to the manager. I mean, this happened to me in Meyer when I was negotiating a camera. And the guy's like, well, I have to talk to the manager. I'm like, okay, I'll wait. And he's like, okay, you will? And I'm like, yeah, I'll wait. And I ended up getting the deal that I wanted. So it's just being patient will pay dividends. Being willing to wait, being willing to take the time to make it work and not be rushed.
Jennifer learned to negotiate as a teenager.
Yeah, well, you know. I had to negotiate with him to get what I wanted. So.
Yeah, if you didn't do the math there, Jim is Jennifer's dad. So.
Yeah. That's my father.
Yes. glad he could be here with us this evening to watch her shine. So Jennifer, what I'm going to do too is I'll send you a copy of what was in the chat. So any specific questions or requests that people made of you. And we appreciate your willingness to send out information again or share your PowerPoint. You know, I'll leave that up to you how much you want to do of that. But I think
you can also share my email.
Okay.
If people want to contact me.
Okay.
I'm more than willing to answer some questions or share some stuff. That's fine.
That's very gracious. Would you rather we share?
It's actually on the last part of the slide. So
okay.
The last slide. It's Vatican Dr. Jen. So I have to play with my last name.
I kind of missed, Jennifer, do you teach at the College of Wooster or is it somewhere?
No, I teach at Grand Valley State University in Michigan. Yeah, I'm an international business and marketing professor.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Complete 180 from what I did in Wooster, where I was a history major with a German minor. So, but I teach in Germany all the time. So
that's the beauty of a liberal arts education.
Yeah.
It's also taught in Slovenia.
Yeah. I've taught in Slovenia and France and Mexico and Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Wow, cool.
So I've been around, and I lived in Slovenia for a year in 2016, 2017 on a Fulbright.
Wow.
So,
yeah. So she knows what she's talking about. That's what she's saying. Yeah, we can trust her guidance and advice.
I'm a German major, and I was a Fulbright too.
Oh, yeah?
Lived there for 2 years, 93 to 95.
Okay. Yeah, mine was 2016, 17.
Oh, wow.
Cool. Just recently. And I did spend some time in Germany. I teach in Germany every year. And so I actually drove up from Slovenia to teach in Germany while I was there. The only time I was there that I had a car, we took full advantage. Because I bought a car when I was living in Slovenia. Little tiny Renault Twingo, where when my brother saw the picture, he asked me where the other half was. It was a very small car. I loved it. I loved my car. I miss my car.
Dated a guy who had that car, and he was a drummer, and he had taken the passenger seat out of the car as well as the back seat to get all of his drum equipment in there.
Yeah.
So when I lived with him, I had to sit on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting.
It's a tiny car.
Yeah, I loved it. So thank you guys very much.
Right,
I really appreciated the time, and I'm willing to stick around if you guys have more questions. Otherwise, I will send the PowerPoints to the people who ask. And
could we get your email fully? I'm sorry. I know it's on the last slide, but I just want to make sure I have it.
Vatican, so VATICAN DRJEN @gmail. So Vatican Dr. Jen. My last name, I got to do something.
I just want to also thank Wooster for putting this on. Great idea. And thanks for opening it up to us.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Wooster team. And Susan, good luck selling that business. You seem really savvy, and I'm sure you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's pretty exciting. It's interesting because it's a psychological transition for me as well. I've had this business for since 2011. So part of it is saying goodbye but that BATNA, I don't know if it doesn't go through, I may sell to an employee. I may continue to work it. Who knows?
Yeah. So having a good BATNA makes sure you don't take a good deal. You don't take a bad deal.
Okay.
So having a good BATNA makes it a lot easier to turn down a bad deal.
Right. You're right.
Because you know what you can do next.
Thank you. And
so
thanks.
That's why it's so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Jennifer. We appreciate your time and your expertise so very much. And we will connect those of you who wish to be connected over the next coming days. And so thank you all for being here and participating in our Winter Alumni College.
Right.